The afternoon sky over Boston had turned steel gray, heavy with the promise of the worst December storm in 30 years. Snow already blanketed the expansive grounds of the Sullivan estate, transforming the manicured gardens into a pristine white canvas. Inside the three-story mansion, warmth radiated from every corner, a deceptive contrast to the coldness that dwelled within its walls. In the rear garden, 7-year-old Emily Sullivan sat quietly in her wheelchair, her small frame nearly swallowed by a purple winter coat. Brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a delicate face dominated by startlingly intelligent blue eyes. Those eyes now stared at the gathering snowflakes with a sorrow no child should possess. Her unmoving legs beneath her coat served as a constant reminder of what she had lost 2 years ago, not just her ability to walk, but also her mother. Clutched tightly against her chest was a well-worn teddy bear, its fur matted from countless tears and embraces. The last gift from her mother before cancer claimed her. Emily's fingers traced the stitching along its belly, a secret comfort ritual she performed whenever fear crept into her heart. From inside the mansion came the melodic sound of a woman's laughter, perfectly pitched to suggest both refinement and warmth. Rebecca Carson Sullivan, the second wife of James Sullivan, was entertaining two close friends from her former modeling days. At 35, she remained stunning. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, her red cashmere sweater complementing her slender figure. "James is always so busy," Rebecca said with a light laugh, raising her wine glass in a casual toast. "He's away in Chicago closing another deal. The company needs him, of course." Her voice dropped to a confidential tone. "But don't worry about little Emily, I take excellent care of her." The words were spoken with such conviction that no one would question their sincerity. Through the French doors, Emily heard everything, her small fingers tightening around her teddy bear. In her young heart, she knew the truth was nothing like the picture Rebecca had painted. Martha Walters, the longtime housekeeper, walked past Emily. The 53-year-old woman's face remained carefully neutral as she leaned slightly toward the child. "Stay out here until her guests leave," Martha whispered, her eyes darting nervously toward the house. "If they see you looking like this, she'll be furious." Emily nodded faintly, her throat tightening. She lowered her head, trying to suppress the cough that threatened to rise, afraid the sound would draw Rebecca's attention. Martha straightened and walked away, her shoulders rigid with an unspoken tension. Inside, a phone rang. Rebecca glanced at the screen, and her smile brightened. "It's James calling," she announced to her guests. She quickly switched to video mode. On the screen appeared the face of James Sullivan. Sullivan, 40 years old, with distinguished features that carried the weight of both success and hidden grief. His expression was tired yet warm, the harsh fluorescent lights of his Chicago hotel room casting shadows across his face. "Rebecca, how are things at home?" James asked, his eyes scanning what he could see of the living room. "Where's Emily?" Rebecca angled the phone with practiced precision, allowing Emily to appear momentarily in the frame, just a glimpse of purple coat and teddy bear in the garden. Almost instantly, she shifted the camera away. "She's resting in the garden, breathing the fresh air is good for her lungs," Rebecca said smoothly. "You worry too much, darling. Everything is perfect here." But in that brief moment, something in Emily's eyes caught James's attention, a flicker of something that didn't match Rebecca's narrative. It was gone before he could process it, but it left an unsettling feeling in his chest. "I'll try to wrap things up early. The storm looks bad," James said, frowning slightly at a weather alert on his laptop. "I should be home by tomorrow night." "Take your time, honey. We're fine," Rebecca reassured him. "Focus on your work. That's what you do best." The screen went dark. In that brief instant, Emily had wanted to cry out, "Dad, please come home." But her lips trembled uselessly, her throat constricted with fear. All she could do was clutch her teddy bear tighter, as if letting go would mean the memory of her mother and her father's love would vanish with it. Have you ever sensed something was wrong in your own home, but couldn't quite identify what? Inside the house, Rebecca's laughter continued, each burst cutting deeper into Emily's heart. When the guests finally left, the atmosphere in the mansion changed instantly. Rebecca slammed the front door shut. The harsh sound made Emily flinch. The click of high heels struck sharply against the marble floor as Rebecca strode purposefully toward the garden, her warm hostess smile replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "What are you doing sitting out here like some tragic little figure?" Rebecca's voice cut through the winter air, each word hissing with barely contained contempt. "Do you think you're in some kind of movie? The poor little crippled girl in the snow?" Emily trembled, hugging her teddy bear even tighter. Tears threatened to fall, but she forced them back, knowing from experience that crying only made everything worse. Rebecca leaned down, her face inches from Emily's, her breath heavy with the scent of expensive wine. "Your father calls, and you try to communicate with those pathetic eyes of yours. You think I didn't notice?" Her manicured fingers gripped the wheelchair's armrest so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Remember our agreement, Emily. Your father doesn't need to worry about anything but his work. That's why he married me, so he wouldn't have to deal with a broken child." Emily's lower lip quivered, but she kept silent. Rebecca straightened, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her cashmere sweater. "Martha will bring you inside in 10 minutes. And if you mention anything to your father when he returns, well, accidents happen all the time to children in wheelchairs, don't they?" The threat hung in the air, as tangible as the snowflakes that continued to fall around them. The next morning, as dawn touched the snow-covered grounds, the sound of a car engine broke the silence. James Sullivan had made the decision to return earlier than planned. During the video call with Rebecca, something had felt off. That split-second glimpse of Emily's face had awakened a dormant paternal instinct he'd buried beneath layers of work and grief. As his black Mustang 1969, a restoration project he'd completed with his late wife, rolled up the driveway, James felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. He glanced at his Rolex Submariner, the wedding gift from his first wife. Whenever he faced important decisions, his fingers invariably found the watch's smooth surface, as if it connected him to her guidance. Carrying a carefully wrapped gift box, a new book of fairy tales he'd found in Chicago, James entered the quiet house. The morning silence felt unusually heavy. He set his briefcase down in the foyer and headed upstairs to Emily's room. Her door was slightly ajar. James pushed it open to find his daughter still asleep, her teddy bear nowhere in sight. That struck him as odd. Emily never slept without it. James sat gently on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. At his touch, her eyes fluttered open, widening in surprise and then joy. "Dad, you're home early." Emily tried to sit up quickly, then winced slightly, her right arm moving awkwardly. James's parental radar immediately activated. "Careful there, sweetheart. What's wrong with your arm?" "Nothing," Emily answered too quickly, pulling her sleeve down. "I just slept on it funny." James nodded, not wanting to press too hard, but his instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. "Where's your teddy bear? You never sleep without Mr. Buttons." A flicker of distress crossed Emily's face before she composed herself. "I don't know, maybe he fell under the bed." James looked around the room, then spotted something in the wastebasket by the door, a tuft of brown fur poking out from beneath crumpled tissues. He walked over and pulled out the teddy bear, its belly slashed open, stuffing spilling out like entrails from a wounded animal. "Emily, what happened to Mr. Buttons?" James asked, his voice carefully controlled. Before Emily could answer, Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face a perfect mask of morning freshness and in her silk robe. "Oh, that old thing was filthy, James, full of germs. I told Emily we'd buy her something new and more appropriate for her age." James looked from the destroyed bear to Rebecca, then to Emily, whose eyes were fixed on her lap. "This was her mother's last gift," he said quietly. Rebecca's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened slightly. "I understand sentiment, darling, but children need to move forward. Don't you agree?" James didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to Emily's bed and placed the damaged bear beside her. "We'll fix him," he promised. "Some things are worth repairing, no matter how broken they seem." Emily's fingers closed around the bear, and she looked up at her father with a hint of hope. "Thank you, Daddy." "James, you must be exhausted from your drive," Rebecca interjected smoothly. "Let me make you some breakfast while Emily gets dressed." When Rebecca left, James sat closer to Emily. "Did Rebecca buy you something to replace Mr. Buttons?" he asked softly. Emily shook her head. "No." "Is there something you want to tell me, Em?" James asked, his voice gentle but probing. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting toward the door. "Mr. Buttons knows everything," she whispered cryptically. But I told him not to tell anyone. The statement sent a chill down James's spine. Before he could ask more, Rebecca called from downstairs, and the moment was lost. That night, after Rebecca had gone to sleep, James returned to Emily's room. Finding her still awake, staring at the ceiling, he sat beside her bed. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "My arm hurts," she admitted in a whisper. "May I see?" James asked carefully. After a moment's hesitation, Emily extended her right arm. James gently pushed up the sleeve of her pajamas, revealing what he'd feared: distinct finger-shaped bruises encircling her small wrist, varying in color from purple to yellowish green, indicating they had occurred at different times. James's heart pounded in his chest, his mouth gone dry. He maintained his calm exterior, but inside a storm was brewing. "Emily, how did this happen?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I fell," she said automatically, then looked away. "Emily, these aren't from falling," James said softly but firmly. "Someone grabbed you very hard. Was it Rebecca?" The room grew silent, save for the sound of snow tapping against the window. Emily's chin trembled, but she remained silent, fear evident in her eyes. "You can tell me anything, sweetheart. I promise I will believe you, and I will keep you safe," James said, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Emily clutched the damaged teddy bear to her chest. "Mr. Buttons knows," she repeated. "He sees everything when you're not here. But if I tell, she said there would be an accident." James felt as though he'd been struck. He carefully rolled Emily's sleeve back down and tucked the blanket around her. His mind was racing, calculating, planning his next move. "Get some sleep now," he said, kissing her forehead. "I'm home early, and I'm not going anywhere." As James left Emily's room, his hand instinctively went to his Rolex, fingers tracing its face as memories flooded back. His wife, Catherine, lying in her hospital bed, her once vibrant features hollowed by cancer, her hand clasping his. "Promise me you'll protect our little girl," she had whispered. "No matter what happens, promise me she'll always feel safe and loved." "I promise," he had said, meaning every word. But after Catherine died, the pain had been too much. He'd buried himself in work, letting Rebecca take over Emily's care, telling himself it was what Emily needed, a mother figure. Now he realized his mistake might have cost his daughter dearly. In the hallway, James paused outside the master bedroom where Rebecca slept. His hand clenched into a fist, then relaxed. This wasn't the time for confrontation. Not until he had proof and a plan to protect Emily. Throughout the night, Emily's cough worsened. By morning, she was struggling to breathe, her small chest heaving with effort. James carried her to the car, ignoring Rebecca's protest that it was just a cold and they should wait it out. At Boston Memorial Hospital, Dr. Linda Thompson, a pediatric rehabilitation specialist in her mid-50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, examined Emily thoroughly. When she asked Rebecca and James to step outside, her expression was grave. "Emily's lungs show signs of inflammation consistent with aspirated fluid," she explained, her voice professional but tinged with a concern. "But what troubles me more are the multiple bruises I've documented on her body. Some are recent, others are in various stages of healing." Rebecca immediately stepped forward, her face a perfect picture of maternal concern. "Emily is prone to falling. With her condition, she bumps into things all the time." But her Thompson's gaze remained steady. "These injuries are inconsistent with accidental falls. The placement and pattern suggest applied force, someone grabbing, pulling, or striking her." James felt his world tilting. Hearing a medical professional confirm what he had feared made it terrifyingly real. "Are you suggesting someone hurt her deliberately?" Rebecca's voice rose, injecting just the right note of outrage. "That's absurd. I take care of her every day while James works. I would know if something happened." Thompson turned to face Rebecca directly. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm stating medical facts. As a mandatory reporter, I am obligated to document these findings and notify Child Protective Services." While Rebecca continued protesting, Eric Carson, her brother and James's financial advisor, arrived at the hospital. He was a well-dressed man in his early 40s with sharp features and calculating eyes. He immediately sided with his sister. "James, you know how delicate Emily is," Eric said smoothly. "Kids with her condition bruise easily. I've consulted with medical experts who confirm this. James remained silent, his mind connecting dots. How Eric had appeared so quickly. How prepared his response seemed. Dr. Thompson excused herself to check on Emily, leaving the three adults in the hallway. I need to see my daughter, James said finally, his voice leaving no room for argument. In the hospital room, Emily lay with an oxygen mask covering her small face. Her breathing had stabilized, but she looked fragile against the white sheets. James sat beside her bed, taking her hand in his. Emily, sweetheart, I need to ask you something very important, he said gently when they were alone. You're not in trouble, and I promise nothing bad will happen to you, but I need to know the truth. Does Rebecca hurt you when I'm not home? Emily's eyes filled with tears. She gave the smallest of nods, then looked fearfully toward the door. She says if I tell you, they'll take me away because you're too busy to take care of a broken child, Emily whispered through the mask. She says no one wants a little girl who can't walk. James felt something break inside him, and simultaneously something hardened. He leaned forward, his voice low and fierce with conviction. Emily, listen to me. I swear to you and to your mother in heaven, I will never let anyone hurt you again. I've been blind and I've failed you, but that ends today. You are the most precious person in my life, and there is nothing broken about you. Tears spilled from Emily's eyes as she clutched her father's hand. For the first time in months, her face showed something beyond fear, the faintest flicker of hope. Outside the room, Dr. Thompson approached James with quiet urgency. Mr. Sullivan, I've filed my report, but you should know that Child Protective Services may take up to 48 hours to begin their investigation due to the storm. Those 48 hours are critical. If Emily returns to an unsafe environment, things could escalate. James understood the implicit warning. What can I legally do to protect her right now? Document everything. If you suspect abuse, you have the right to remove Emily from potential harm. As her father, you have primary custody, but proceed carefully. False allegations can complicate matters tremendously. The conversation was interrupted by Rebecca, who approached with tear-streaked cheeks. The nurse said Emily can go home tomorrow morning, she said, her voice thick with emotion. James, you can't possibly believe I would hurt her. She's like my own daughter. James looked at his wife of 2 years, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The calculated vulnerability, the perfect tears that never quite reached her eyes. We'll discuss this at home, he said simply. That night, while Emily slept in her hospital bed and Rebecca had gone home to prepare for Emily's return, James made a phone call that would change everything. Detective Sarah Martinez, answered a firm female voice. This is James Sullivan, he said, watching the snow fall outside the hospital window. I need help. I believe my daughter is being abused by my wife, and I need to know how to protect her. In her downtown office, Detective Martinez set down her coffee, her attention immediately focused. Mr. Sullivan, are you reporting suspected child abuse? Yes, I have photographic evidence of bruises, a doctor's preliminary report, and my daughter has confirmed it. But I need to know what happens next, because I will not let her be hurt again. There was a brief silence before Martinez spoke again, her voice precise and focused. Keep all medical documentation. Take photographs of any injuries. Do not directly confront the suspected abuser when alone. I'll open a case file and contact the hospital tonight. She paused, then added with quiet intensity, and Mr. Sullivan, do not leave your daughter's side. I won't, James promised, but there's something else. I think this goes beyond just my daughter. My wife's brother is my financial advisor, and I'm starting to suspect there might be financial irregularities I've overlooked. Financial exploitation often accompanies other forms of abuse, Martinez noted. We'll need to investigate that angle as well. In the meantime, focus on your daughter's safety. After hanging up, James sat beside Emily's bed, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. The oxygen mask had been removed, her breathing easier now. Outside, the snow continued to fall, the weather reports warning of the worst storm in decades approaching Boston. James took out his phone and began searching for information on child abuse cases, protective measures, and legal options. As the night deepened, his determination solidified into an unbreakable resolve. He had made a promise to Catherine as she lay dying, and he had failed to keep it. But it wasn't too late to make it right. What would you do if you discovered someone you trusted was hurting the person you love most? Early the next morning, Dr. Thompson entered with Emily's discharge papers. Mr. Sullivan, before you take Emily home, I want to be absolutely clear. The bruises I documented are concerning, but what's more alarming is their pattern, consistent with regular, repeated incidents. This is not a one-time occurrence. James nodded grimly. I understand. And I want you to know that Emily will not be returning to an unsafe environment. Good, Dr. Thompson said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Sometimes, Mr. Sullivan, we need to rebuild our lives from the ground up to protect what matters most. As James helped Emily get dressed, he noticed how she winced when moving her left side. Does it hurt here? He asked gently, his hand hovering over her ribs. Emily nodded. Rebecca was mad because I spilled my medicine, she admitted in a whisper. She said I did it on purpose to make more work for her. James carefully finished buttoning Emily's coat, his hands steady despite the rage building inside him. You don't have to worry about that anymore, he assured her. Dad's going to take care of everything now. In the hospital parking lot, James was loading Emily into his car when a sleek black Audi pulled up beside them. Eric Carson stepped out, his expression one of practiced concern. James, I came to drive you both home, he said smoothly. Rebecca is beside herself with worry. We're fine, Eric, James replied, his tone neutral but firm. I have my car. Eric moved closer, lowering his voice. James, be reasonable. The media would have a field day with false abuse allegations. Think about what this could do to Sullivan Construction's reputation. The board members are already nervous about the West Side project. James straightened to his full height, looking his brother-in-law directly in the eye. Are you threatening me, Eric? Of course not. Eric backpedaled smoothly. I'm looking out for your interests, our family's interests. This is a misunderstanding that can be cleared up privately. There's nothing to misunderstand about finger-shaped bruises on my daughter's body, James said quietly, his voice carrying an edge that made Eric step back. Now, if you'll excuse us, Emily and I are going home. As James pulled out of the parking lot, he glanced in the rearview mirror to see Eric already on his phone, his expression grim. The snow was falling more heavily now, the windshield wipers barely keeping up. In the back seat, Emily held her damaged teddy bear, watching the white world pass by. Dad? She asked tentatively. Will Rebecca be at home? Yes, James answered honestly, but you won't be alone with her, not even for a second. Dad's going to be right there with you. Promise? Emily's voice was small, uncertain. James met her eyes in the mirror, his voice unwavering. I promise. And this time, I'm keeping it. As they drove through Boston's snow-covered streets, James made a mental list of what needed to happen next. Document everything, install security cameras, meet with his lawyer, review his financial records. The task seemed overwhelming, but when he glanced back at Emily, her face reflecting both fear and fragile hope, he knew he would move mountains to keep her safe. The Sullivan estate loomed ahead, its grand facade now seeming less like a home and more like a battlefield. James tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his Rolex catching the winter light, a reminder of another promise made long ago. We're going home, James said, his voice steady as the Mustang pulled into the driveway. And we're going to fix what's broken. But the worst storm in 30 years was gathering strength, and inside the house, Rebecca Carson Sullivan was already plotting her next move, unaware that this time James Sullivan was watching. The first battle in the war for Emily's safety was about to begin. The Sullivan estate stood silent in the growing storm, snowflakes swirling like tiny white specters around its imposing facade. James guided the wheelchair up the specially installed ramp, sheltering Emily from the falling snow with his body. His eyes scanned the property with new awareness, noting the security cameras positioned at the entrance. Cameras he now realized might have recorded more than he knew. Rebecca opened the front door before they reached it, her face a portrait of wifely concern. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that highlighted her slender figure, her hair perfectly styled despite the stress she claimed to be under. Thank God you're both home safe, she exclaimed, reaching to help with Emily's wheelchair. The weather reports say this storm could last for days. James smoothly maneuvered the wheelchair himself, preventing Rebecca from taking control. We're fine, Emily needs rest, so I'll take her to her room. A flash of something, irritation, Anger crossed Rebecca's features before her mask of concern returned. Of course, darling, I've already prepared her favorite soup. As James passed her in the doorway, the scent of her expensive perfume made his stomach turn. How had he never noticed the coldness behind those eyes, the calculation in her smile? He had been so consumed by his own grief, so desperate to provide Emily with a mother figure, that he'd failed to see what was happening in his own home. In Emily's room, James had helped her into bed, arranging her pillows the way she liked them. I need to talk with Rebecca, he said softly, but I'll leave your door open, and I'll be right down the hall. If you need anything, anything at all, you call out, okay? Emily nodded, clutching her damaged teddy bear. Mr. Buttons will watch me, she whispered. James smiled, though his heart ached at her words. That's right, and so will I. He placed her emergency call button within easy reach and left the door wide open. In his home office, James found Rebecca waiting, her posture defensive despite her concerned expression. She'd positioned herself in the visitor's chair rather than on the couch, forcing James to either stand over her domineeringly or sit behind his desk in a formal, distancing posture. A subtle power play that he might have missed before. He chose to sit on the edge of the desk instead, breaking her choreographed scenario. We need to talk about Emily, he said, his voice level. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. I agree completely. James, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. Emily has always been prone to bruising. Dr. Thompson overreacted. Stop, James held up his hand. I've seen the bruises. I've spoken with Emily. This isn't about medical opinions. It's about the truth. Rebecca's composure faltered momentarily before she recovered, tears welling in her eyes. You can't possibly think I would hurt her. James, I love her like my own daughter. These past 2 years, while you were buried in work, who was here? Who drove her to therapy, helped with her exercises, read her stories? Did you also push her wheelchair into walls? James asked quietly. Did you grab her arms so hard it left fingerprints? Did you pour water over her head in freezing weather? Rebecca shot to her feet, her face flushing with what appeared to be righteous indignation. How dare you? Emily is making this up. Children with trauma sometimes create false memories. I read about this. It's common for children who've lost a parent. So Dr. Thompson is wrong, Emily is lying, and you're the only one telling the truth? James's voice remained calm, which seemed to unsettle Rebecca more than if he'd shouted. I'm saying there are explanations, Rebecca insisted, a slight tremor in her voice. Emily needs psychological help, not accusations that vilify the one person who's been here for her. James studied his wife's face, recognizing the skilled manipulation at play. She was repositioning herself as the victim, Emily as unreliable, and him as absent and misled. Here's what happens now, James said firmly. Emily will not be left alone with you. Not for a minute. I'm taking a leave of absence from work to be here full time. This is ridiculous, Rebecca scoffed, though her eyes darted nervously to the windows as another gust of wind drove snow against the glass. What about the Chicago deal? The board meeting next week? You can't just abandon everything because of some misunderstanding. Watch me, James replied simply. Rebecca's strategy shifted instantly. Her shoulders slumped, and tears, real or manufactured, James couldn't tell, spilled down her cheeks. I thought you loved me, she whispered. I've given everything to this family, and now you're treating me like a monster. For a moment, doubt flickered in James's mind. What if he was wrong? What if there was an explanation? But then Emily's bruises flashed before his eyes, along with her fearful expression when she'd spoken of Rebecca. I need time to sort this out, he said, not engaging with her emotional display. Until then, my priority is Emily's safety. And what about my reputation? Rebecca demanded, her vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. What will people think when they hear these accusations? They'll think the truth, whatever that may be, James answered. Before Rebecca could respond, his cell phone rang. Detective Martinez. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the hallway. Rebecca watched him go, her expression hardening into something altogether different from the distressed wife she'd portrayed moments before. She pulled out her own phone and sent a text. Problem bigger than expected. Meet tonight. While James spoke with Detective Martinez in the hallway, planning their next steps, Rebecca slipped upstairs, pausing outside Emily's room. The child was asleep, her damaged teddy bear clutched to her chest. Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she studied the scene, calculating her options. The storm outside had intensified, howling wind and snow creating a natural isolation that could work in her favor. "Rebecca?" James's voice came from behind her, startling her. She turned, a maternal smile instantly replacing her cold assessment. "I was just checking on her," she said softly. "She seemed tired after the hospital." "I'll take care of Emily," James said firmly. "You should rest too. It's been a difficult day." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Rebecca nodded, feigning hurt acceptance, and retreated to their bedroom. James watched her go, then pulled a chair from the guest room and positioned it outside Emily's door. He wouldn't be leaving his post tonight. "Do you think Rebecca will accept defeat so easily? Or is she planning something more sinister?" As night fell, the storm intensified. Wind howled around the eaves of the Sullivan mansion, and snow piled against the windows. Inside, the house had divided into territories. Emily's room, where James maintained his vigil. The master bedroom, where Rebecca had sequestered herself. And the quiet, tense spaces in between. Around midnight, James heard the faint sound of Rebecca's voice from the master bedroom. She was speaking quietly, urgently, though he couldn't make out the words. A phone call, he suspected, though to whom? As if in answer, his own phone buzzed with a text from Detective Martinez. "Background check on Rebecca Carson shows inconsistencies. Will brief you in morning." James frowned, rereading the message. Inconsistencies? What kind of woman had he married? The question troubled him as he settled back in his chair, prepared for a long night. In her bedroom, Rebecca paced, her voice low as she spoke to Eric on the phone. Gone was the perfectly poised socialite, replaced by a woman with hard eyes and calculating precision. "He knows something," she hissed. "The doctor found the bruises." "Keep calm," Eric's voice replied smoothly. "James is emotional right now, not rational. Let him play protector for a few days. When nothing new happens, he'll start to doubt himself. And if he doesn't, if he digs deeper?" A pause. "Then we accelerate our timeline. The storm gives us an opportunity. Power outages are expected. Things happen during storms. Accidents." Rebecca glanced toward the window, where snow pelted the glass like tiny bullets. "He's not leaving her side." "Everyone sleeps eventually," Eric replied coldly. "Besides, the financial transfers are already in motion. We're too close to back out now." After ending the call, Rebecca opened her bedside drawer, removing a small velvet pouch. From it, she extracted an old photograph, a mugshot of a younger woman with darker hair, but the same sharp eyes. Vanessa Miller, arrested for fraud in 2015. She studied her former self before carefully burning the photo in the bathroom sink, washing away the ashes. No one knew about Vanessa anymore. Rebecca Carson had been born the day she met Eric at a Miami resort, where he'd been immediately captivated by her beauty and charm. He'd taught her everything: how to speak, how to dress, how to target wealthy, vulnerable men. James Sullivan had been perfect, recently widowed, wealthy, with a disabled daughter he couldn't handle alone. The plan had always been simple: marry him, wait a suitable period, then divorce him with a substantial settlement. But Eric had discovered something even more valuable: weaknesses in James's company structure that would allow them to siphon millions if they had access to the right accounts. Rebecca returned to her bed, mind racing. James was becoming a problem sooner than expected, and problems needed to be eliminated. The next morning, James awoke with a jolt, momentarily disoriented in the uncomfortable chair. He checked Emily's room. She was still sleeping peacefully. Downstairs, he found Martha already preparing breakfast, her movements tense and efficient. "Martha," James said quietly, "I need to ask you something important." The housekeeper froze, her back to him. "Mr. Sullivan? Has Rebecca been hurting Emily?" Martha's shoulders sagged slightly, but she didn't turn around. "I don't know what you mean, sir." James stepped closer. "Martha, you've been with our family since before Emily was born. You were here when Catherine was sick. I'm asking you now, as someone who loves my daughter, has Rebecca been mistreating her?" Finally, Martha turned, her eyes downcast. "I have bills to pay, Mr. Sullivan. My sister's medical treatments. I can't afford to lose this job." You won't, James promised. But Emily needs your help, please. Martha's eyes darted nervously toward the doorway before she whispered, Not here. She has ways of knowing what's said in this house. James followed her gaze, noticing for the first time a small decorative object on the bookshelf, an innocuous-looking crystal figurine that seemed slightly out of place. Moving closer, he examined it and discovered a tiny lens embedded in its base, a hidden camera. His blood ran cold. How many more were there throughout the house? And how long had Rebecca been monitoring their conversations? James grabbed a notepad and pen, scribbling a note to Martha. Meet me in the garage in 10 minutes. She nodded almost imperceptibly and continued preparing breakfast as if nothing had happened. In the garage, surrounded by the reassuring smell of motor oil and the protective bulk of his vintage Mustang, James found Martha waiting, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. There are cameras in almost every room, she said without preamble, her voice barely above a whisper. She installed them after you left for Chicago. How long has she been hurting Emily? James asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. It started small, Martha admitted, shame evident in her downcast eyes. Sharp words, accidental bumps. Then about 6 months ago, she began punishing Emily for small things. Spilling food, making noise when you were on business calls. She'd grab her arms, shake her. Martha's voice cracked. Last month, she pushed the wheelchair into a wall when Emily asked to call you. James closed his eyes briefly, the weight of his failure crushing him. 6 months. 6 months of him while he buried himself in work, trusting that his daughter was being cared for. Why didn't you tell me, he asked, though he already knew the answer. She threatened to fire me, to claim I was stealing. I have no savings, Mr. Sullivan. My sister's cancer treatments. Martha's eyes welled with tears. But that's no excuse. I should have protected Emily. I've hated myself every day for staying silent. James placed a hand on the housekeeper's shoulder. We can't change the past, but we can protect Emily now. I need your help, Martha. Will you help me? Martha straightened, something resolute replacing the fear in her expression. Tell me what to do. Inside the house, Rebecca was helping Emily with breakfast, the picture of maternal devotion. Her performance was flawless. Gentle hands, caring smile, patient voice. Only Emily knew that those same hands had left bruises on her arms, that the smile never reached those cold eyes. Where's Dad? Emily asked quietly, pushing her oatmeal around the bowl. Working in his office, sweetheart. He has an important call with Chicago. Rebecca's voice was honeyed, but her eyes held a warning. You know how busy Daddy is. Emily said nothing more, her appetite gone. She knew better than to contradict Rebecca. The sound of the front door opening brought relief as James entered the kitchen, snow dusting his shoulders. His eyes immediately sought Emily's, a reassuring smile forming when he saw she was all right. Good morning, Princess, he said, crossing to kiss the top of her head. Sleep well? Emily nodded, her eyes brightening at his presence. Are you staying home today? Absolutely, James confirmed, ignoring the flash of annoyance that crossed Rebecca's perfectly composed features. In fact, I thought we could set up a movie marathon in the den. The storm's too bad for us to go anywhere. That sounds lovely, Rebecca interjected smoothly. I'll join you. It's been ages since we had family time. James met her gaze directly. Actually, I was hoping you could help Martha prepare for the storm. The generator needs checking, and we should inventory our supplies. The weather report says we could be snowed in for days. Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, whatever you think is best. As Rebecca left the kitchen with Martha, James knelt beside Emily's wheelchair. How are you feeling today? He asked softly. Better now that you're here, Emily whispered back. But Dad, be careful. Rebecca has eyes everywhere. James nodded, impressed by his daughter's perceptiveness. I know, sweetheart, but don't worry. Dad has a plan. While Rebecca was occupied with storm preparations, James made his way to his home office, locking the door behind him. He opened his laptop and began systematically checking his financial accounts, his suspicions growing with each statement he reviewed. Several large transfers had been made to offshore accounts in the past month, transfers he had no recollection of authorizing. His signature appeared on the documents, But looking closely, he could see subtle differences from his actual signature. Someone had forged his name, and he had a strong suspicion who was behind it. Further investigation revealed something even more disturbing. His will had been modified just 3 months ago. According to the new version, in the event of his death, Rebecca would receive not just her widow's portion, but full control of Emily's trust fund as her guardian. Emily would only gain control of her inheritance at age 30 if she was mentally competent as determined by a trustee named Eric Carson. James's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about abuse, it was about money. Potentially millions of dollars that would be in Rebecca's control if something happened to him. And with the modified will, she'd have every incentive to ensure Emily never controlled her own inheritance. He was reaching for his phone to call his lawyer when a notification popped up on his computer. Security system disabled. The storm must have affected the power. The backup generator would handle essentials like heat and refrigeration, but the security system required a manual reset. James quickly saved the financial documents to a secure cloud drive and headed to the basement to check the generator and security panel. The house felt eerily quiet, the usual electronic hum of appliances silenced by the power outage. In the basement, James found the security panel blinking red, offline. But as he reached to reset it, he noticed something odd. The main power cable had been cleanly cut. This wasn't storm damage, this was deliberate. A noise behind him made James turn sharply. Eric Carson stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, his expression neutral but his eyes cold. "Looking for something, James?" Eric asked, his tone conversational. "What are you doing here?" James demanded, immediately wary. "How did you even get through the storm?" Eric smiled thinly. "I arrived last night, actually. Rebecca thought you might need family support during this difficult time." He glanced at the cut security cable. "Having technical problems?" "Someone cut the cable," James stated flatly. "Any idea who might have done that?" Eric shrugged, moving further into the room with casual confidence. "Old houses, faulty wiring, could be anything. But while I have you alone, we should talk about Emily." "What about her?" James's muscles tensed, ready for whatever might come. "Rebecca told me about the misunderstanding at the hospital. I'm concerned that you're jumping to conclusions based on a child's imagination and an overreactive doctor." Eric's voice was smooth, reasonable. "Children Emily's age often create stories, especially traumatized children." "This isn't about stories," James countered. "It's about physical evidence. Bruises, fear, my daughter's testimony." Eric sighed as if disappointed. "James, you're a businessman. You know how important evidence is. One doctor's opinion isn't conclusive, and children bruise easily, especially those with circulation issues like Emily." "Why are you really here, Eric?" James asked bluntly. Something shifted in Eric's expression, the mask of concern slipping to reveal calculation beneath. "To protect my sister's reputation, and to remind you that hasty accusations can damage more than just marriages. Sullivan Construction's board wouldn't look kindly on a CEO making wild allegations while abandoning crucial business negotiations." The threat was thinly veiled. James had built his company from the ground up, and though the board couldn't remove him entirely, they could certainly limit his control if they lost confidence in his leadership. "Are you threatening me?" James asked quietly. Eric smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "I'm advising you as your financial consultant and brother-in-law. Think carefully about your next steps." With that, Eric turned and headed back upstairs, leaving James alone with the cut security cable and a growing certainty that he was facing something far more dangerous than he'd initially realized. Upstairs, James found Emily in the den, bundled in blankets, watching a movie. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, but quickly darted to the doorway behind him, checking if he was alone. "Where's Rebecca?" James asked casually, sitting beside her. "She went upstairs with Uncle Eric," Emily whispered. They looked angry. James nodded, keeping his expression neutral for Emily's benefit while his mind raced. He needed to document the cut security cable, needed to secure copies of the financial records, needed to get in touch with Detective Martinez. But the storm had knocked out cell service, and the landlines were down. They were effectively isolated in the house with Rebecca and Eric, who clearly had motives beyond simple abuse. The realization sent a chill down James's spine that had nothing to do with the winter storm raging outside. What kind of danger is the Sullivan family facing now that Eric has arrived? As the afternoon stretched into evening, the storm showed no signs of abating. Snow piled against the windows, and wind howled through the eaves like a living thing. Inside the Sullivan mansion, the atmosphere was equally turbulent, though cloaked in artificial calm. James had moved Emily to his home office, the one room he was certain contained no hidden cameras. He'd brought her books, snacks, and her iPad, creating a comfortable nest on the leather couch. He kept the door locked, stepping out only briefly to check on the storm's progress and the generator's fuel level. During one such check, he encountered Rebecca in the hallway. She wore a fitted sweater dress that accentuated her figure, her makeup refreshed despite the power outage. The perfect image of a concerned wife weathering a family crisis. "James, this is getting ridiculous," she said, her voice pitched low but intense. "You've locked yourself away with Emily all day. What exactly do you think is going to happen?" "I think you know exactly what I'm concerned about," James replied evenly. Rebecca stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on his chest. "I know we've had our differences, but I love you, James. I love our family. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong." Her perfume enveloped him, the same scent that had once seemed so alluring, now cloying and suffocating. James gently removed her hand from his chest. "We'll sort this out when the storm passes," he said neutrally. "For now, Emily needs rest and stability." Rebecca's eyes hardened momentarily before she composed herself. "Of course, I only want what's best for her, for all of us." She glanced toward the office door. She can't stay locked in there forever, though. She needs her medication, her physical therapy. The reminder of Emily's medical needs sent a jolt of worry through James. His daughter's pain medication was in her bathroom, and her therapy equipment was in the sunroom. How long could he keep her isolated in his office? "I'll take care of what she needs," he said firmly. Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You always were determined, James. It's what I admired about you from the start." She turned to leave, then added casually, "Eric made dinner. We'll save you both a plate." James returned to the office, mind racing. The way Rebecca had mentioned Emily's medication felt like a veiled threat, a reminder of his daughter's vulnerability. As he entered, Emily looked up from her book, her expression instantly alert to his concern. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked. James forced a reassuring smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just checking on the storm." Emily studied him with eyes too perceptive for a 7-year-old. "She's planning something, isn't she? I can tell by your face." James sat beside her on the couch, struck again by his daughter's intuition. "Emily, I need you to tell me everything Rebecca does when I'm not home. Every detail you can remember." Emily clutched her repaired teddy bear tighter, her small fingers tracing the new stitches James had made to close the tear. "She changes when you leave," she said softly. Her voice gets cold. "She says I'm a burden, that you only keep me out of obligation." Anger flared in James's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "What else, sweetheart?" "She checks your office when you're gone, takes pictures of papers. And she and Uncle Eric talk a lot on the phone, but they use different names sometimes." James froze. "Different names? Do you remember what names?" Emily's brow furrowed in concentration. "She called him Tyler once, and he called her Vanessa." Vanessa. The name triggered a vague memory, something from the early days of his relationship with Rebecca. Hadn't there been a friend she mentioned, a Vanessa, who disappeared under troubling circumstances? "Emily, this is very important," James said, keeping his voice gentle despite his racing heart. "Has Rebecca ever talked about what would happen if I had an accident or got sick?" Emily's eyes widened, filling with tears. "She told Martha that everything would be simpler if you had an accident like Mommy did." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad, I don't think Mommy's accident was really an accident." The words hit James like a physical blow. Catherine's death had been a tragic car crash on an icy road, the kind that happened too often in Boston winters. The investigation had been straightforward. There'd been no reason to suspect foul play. But now, with everything he was learning about Rebecca, cold doubt seeped into his mind. Could she have been involved somehow? It seemed impossible. He'd met Rebecca months after Catherine's death, yet Emily's words planted a seed of suspicion he couldn't ignore. "Why do you say that, Em?" he asked carefully. "I found pictures on Rebecca's phone," Emily explained. "Old ones, from before you knew her. She was watching our house. A chill ran down James's spine. Are you sure? Emily nodded solemnly. I recognized our old mailbox with the bluebirds Mommy painted. Rebecca was so angry when she caught me looking. That's when her voice trembled, her hand unconsciously moving to her ribs where James had seen the worst bruising. James pulled his daughter into a gentle embrace, his mind reeling with implications. If what Emily was suggesting was true, then Rebecca, or Vanessa, had targeted their family before Catherine's death. The thought was almost too horrific to contemplate. Emily, listen to me, he said firmly. I'm going to protect you. Nothing bad is going to happen to either of us. But I need to get some things from your room. Will you be okay here for just a few minutes? The door will be locked. Emily nodded bravely. I'll be okay. Mr. Buttons will watch over me. James kissed her forehead, then moved to his desk. From the bottom drawer, he removed a small revolver he kept for home protection. He checked that it was loaded, then tucked it into the back of his waistband, covering it with his sweater. He hoped he wouldn't need it, but the cut security cable and Emily's revelations left him unwilling to take chances. I'll be right back, he promised, locking the office door behind him, and the hallway was dimly lit by emergency lights, casting long shadows across the wood floor. James moved silently toward the stairs, every sense heightened. From the dining room came the murmur of voices, Rebecca and Eric, speaking too quietly for him to make out the words. He climbed the stairs swiftly, entering Emily's bedroom. The space felt different now, knowing what had happened here. He gathered Emily's medication from her bathroom, along with her favorite pajamas and the photo of Catherine she kept by her bed. As he turned to leave, James noticed something odd about the bookshelf near Emily's window. A book had been placed at an unusual angle, as if hastily returned. Curious, he pulled it out, a collection of fairy tales Catherine had loved reading to Emily. Inside, he found something unexpected, a small notebook with Emily's childish handwriting. She had been keeping a diary, documenting dates and incidents. Deck 5, Rebecca pushed my chair. Deck 7, no dinner because I spilled water. Deck 12, Rebecca said if I tell Dad, I'll have an accident. Page after page of documented abuse, hidden in the one place Rebecca wouldn't think to look. A book of fairy tales. James felt sick with guilt and rage. His daughter had been silently recording her torment while he remained oblivious, buried in work and grief. He tucked the diary into his pocket, crucial evidence for when they could finally reach Detective Martinez. As he turned to leave, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. James froze, listening intently. Soft footsteps approached, then stopped outside Emily's door. James silently moved behind the door just as it swung open. Eric stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the space with calculated precision. When he found it empty, he pulled out his phone and began photographing Emily's medications, the contents of her drawers, her therapy schedule on the wall. James watched, confusion mixing with growing alarm. Why would Eric be interested in Emily's medical information? The answer hit him with sickening clarity. They were building a case, documenting her condition, her medications, creating a narrative they could use if something happened to her. Anger surged through James, hot and electric. He stepped from behind the door, causing Eric to spin around, nearly dropping his phone. What are you doing in my daughter's room? James demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. Eric recovered quickly, slipping his phone into his pocket with practiced casualness. Looking for you, actually. Rebecca's concerned about how long Emily's been without her medication. Is that why you're photographing her prescriptions? James asked, taking a step forward. Something shifted in Eric's demeanor, the mask of concerned uncle falling away to reveal a colder, more calculating expression. You're under a lot of stress, James. Seeing threats where there aren't any. It's understandable, given the circumstances. What circumstances would those be? My discovery that my wife is abusing my daughter? Or that someone's been embezzling from my company? Or perhaps that my security system was deliberately disabled during a convenient winter storm? Eric's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. You should be careful about making accusations you can't substantiate. It could be damaging to your reputation, your company. He paused meaningfully. Even to Emily's well-being. The threat hung in the air between them. James stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. If anything happens to my daughter, anything at all, I will hold you personally responsible. And I promise you, there won't be a place on earth where you can hide from me. Eric studied him for a long moment, apparently reassessing the man he'd previously dismissed as an oblivious workaholic. We're family, James. This kind of talk isn't productive. Why don't we all sit down and discuss things rationally once the storm passes? I'm sure there's an explanation for everything that's troubling you. I'm sure there is, James agreed coldly, and I intend to hear every detail of it from Detective Martinez when she arrives tomorrow morning. It was a bluff. With the roads impassable and communication down, Martinez had no way of reaching them. But James watched Eric carefully for his reaction. He wasn't disappointed. A flash of genuine concern crossed the man's face before his composed mask returned. Good idea, Eric said smoothly. The sooner we clear this up, the better for everyone. He gestured to the door. Shall we rejoin the others? Martha's prepared some soup despite the power situation. Emily must be hungry by now. James followed Eric downstairs, the weight of Emily's diary heavy in his pocket and the gun pressing against his back. He'd learned enough to know that whatever was happening in his house went far beyond simple abuse or embezzlement. Rebecca and Eric were planning something more sinister, and the storm had provided them the perfect opportunity. Isolation, no witnesses, no help coming. As they descended the stairs, a crash from the direction of James's office made his blood run cold. He sprinted down the remaining steps, Eric momentarily forgotten. The office door was still locked, but through it came the unmistakable sound of Emily crying out in pain. "Emily!" James shouted, fumbling with his keys. "I'm coming!" When he finally got the door open, the scene inside stopped him cold. Rebecca stood over Emily, who had fallen from the couch onto the floor. The wheelchair lay overturned nearby, and Rebecca held Emily's teddy bear in one hand, the bear that now had a long tear down its middle, stuffing spilling out like a gruesome wound. "What did you do?" James demanded, rushing to Emily's side. Rebecca's expression was a perfect blend of surprise and concern. "James, thank goodness you're here. I was bringing Emily some soup, and she got so excited to see me that she tried to get up. She fell, you know how unsteady she is." Emily looked up at James, her eyes wide with fear and denial. "She pushed my chair, Dad. She said you weren't coming back." Rebecca made a sympathetic clicking sound. "See how confused she gets? Dr. Thompson mentioned possible medication side effects. Paranoia, confusion, these can happen with trauma and the drug she's on." James gently helped Emily back onto the couch, noting the fresh red mark on her cheek. "And I suppose her face just happened to hit your hand as she fell?" Rebecca's composure slipped for just a moment, irritation flashing across her features before the concerned mask returned. "You're not thinking clearly, James. I would never hurt Emily. Never." "Get out," James said quietly, his voice shaking with controlled rage. "Get out of this room right now." Rebecca hesitated, glancing past him to where Eric now stood in the doorway. Some unspoken communication passed between them before she nodded slightly. "You need time to calm down," she said soothingly. "We'll talk later when you are more rational." She placed the torn teddy bear on the desk with exaggerated gentleness, then swept from the room, Eric closing the door behind her. James immediately locked it, then turned to Emily. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" Emily shook her head, though her cheek was reddening where Rebecca had struck her. "She broke Mr. Buttons," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. James picked up the damaged bear, examining the tear. It wasn't random. The stitches he'd made earlier had been deliberately cut, and something had been removed from inside. Understanding dawned as he remembered Emily's words about Rebecca taking pictures of his papers. The teddy bear hadn't just been a comfort object. Emily had been using it to hide evidence. "Emily, what was inside Mr. Buttons?" James asked gently. "The little camera from your desk," Emily admitted. "I've been recording Rebecca when you're not home. I wanted proof so you'd believe me." James stared at his daughter in amazement. At 7 years old, traumatized and abused, she'd had the presence of mind to gather evidence against her tormentor. Pride surged through him, tempered by heartbreak that she'd felt the need to protect herself this way. "You are the bravest person I've ever known," he told her, meaning every word. "And I promise you, we're going to get through this." Emily looked up at him, a spark of hope in her eyes that nearly broke his heart. "Really?" "Really," James confirmed, moving to the window to check the storm's progress. The snow was still falling heavily, the wind driving it into drifts that nearly reached the first-floor windows. The roads would be impassable for at least another day. They were trapped with two people who clearly meant them harm, with no way to call for help. James touched the gun at his back, reassured by its presence, but hoping it wouldn't come to that. He needed a plan, a way to protect Emily until the storm passed and they could safely leave. What James didn't know was that downstairs, Rebecca and Eric were forming plans of their own. In the kitchen, they spoke in hushed tones, heads close together. "He knows too much," Eric murmured, his eyes darting toward the ceiling, where James and Emily remained barricaded in the office. He mentioned Detective Martinez. Rebecca's expression hardened, all pretense of the caring wife gone now that they were alone. "Then we move tonight. The storm gives us the perfect cover. The power's out, the security system's down, and no one can reach this place for at least 24 hours. "What about Martha?" Eric asked. "Sleeping pills in her tea. She'll be out until morning." Rebecca's smile was cold, calculating. "By then it will be too late." Eric nodded, reaching into his jacket to extract a small vial. "2 drops in his drink. He'll be disoriented enough for us to stage the accident." "The girl—" "Leave Emily to me," Rebecca interrupted, her voice taking on an edge that would have chilled James to the bone had he heard it. "I've waited a long time to be rid of that burden." Outside, the storm raged on, snow and wind creating a white wall that isolated the Sullivan estate from the rest of the world. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would determine the fate of a father, a daughter, and the promise he'd made to protect her at all costs. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, its sound eerily amplified in the storm-silenced house. James peered through a crack in the office blinds at the snow-buried landscape outside. The blizzard had reached its peak, transforming the familiar grounds into an alien terrain of white drifts and shadow. Nothing moved out there, no vehicles, no wildlife, not even the branches of the old oak trees that normally swayed in winter winds. They stood frozen, encased in ice like sentinels rendered powerless by the storm. Inside the office, James had transformed the space into a makeshift bedroom for Emily. She lay on the leather couch wrapped in blankets, her breathing soft but troubled in sleep. The red mark on her cheek had darkened to a bruise, physical evidence of Rebecca's true nature. James touched his daughter's hair gently, careful not to wake her. She needed rest to face whatever was coming. He moved to his desk, spreading out what evidence he had gathered. Emily's diary, documenting months of abuse, printouts of the forged financial transfers, photos of Emily's bruises taken at the hospital, and the torn remnants of Mr. Buttons, the teddy bear that had concealed Emily's secret recording device. The camera itself was gone, taken by Rebecca when she destroyed the bear. A soft knock on the door startled him. James reached for the gun at his back, approaching cautiously. "Who is it?" he called, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Emily. "It's Martha, Mr. Sullivan," came the hushed reply. James cracked the door, keeping his body positioned to block any attempt to push past him. Martha stood alone in the hallway, her face ashen in the emergency lighting. She held a thermos in trembling hands. "I brought some hot chocolate for Emily," she whispered, "and I need to warn you, they're planning something tonight." James studied her face, searching for signs of deception, but saw only fear and genuine concern. He opened the door wider, allowing her to step inside before securing it again. "What did you hear?" he asked as Martha set the thermos down. "They didn't know I was in the pantry," Martha explained, her voice barely audible. "Rebecca said tonight was perfect because of the storm. No one can reach us, and—" She swallowed hard. "Accidents happen during blizzards." James's jaw tightened. "Did they mention specifics?" Martha nodded. "Something about drops in your drink to disorient you. And Rebecca said she would handle Emily." Her eyes filled with tears as she glanced at the sleeping child. "I tried to refuse when Rebecca asked me to bring you both tea earlier. Said I was too tired. She insisted, but I spilled it deliberately. I think she put something in it." "Thank you, Martha," James said, genuine gratitude in his voice. "You may have saved our lives." "There's something else," Martha added, her voice dropping even lower. "I found an old emergency phone line in the cellar. Runs underground, separate from the main house system. I managed to get through to Detective Martinez. I told her everything, about Rebecca, Eric, the abuse, all of it. She said she'd try to reach us. But with the roads like this—" Martha's voice trailed off, the impossibility of immediate help hanging in the air between them. You did the right thing, James assured her, squeezing her shoulder gently. Even if she can't get here tonight, knowing someone is trying matters. What are we going to do, Mr. Sullivan? Martha asked, wringing her hands. The phones are dead. The roads are impassable. James considered their options, which were frighteningly few. They were isolated, outnumbered, and facing two people who had clearly planned this scenario meticulously. First, we need to secure the house, he decided. Are there any other exits besides the main doors and windows? The cellar has an old coal chute that opens to the side yard, Martha offered. It's narrow, but Emily could fit through it. Perhaps you too, if necessary. James nodded, committing the information to memory. Where are Rebecca and Eric now? In the kitchen last I saw them. Rebecca was preparing dinner. She insisted on making your favorite pasta dish. Martha's expression conveyed the implied threat behind this seemingly thoughtful gesture. The sound of footsteps in the hallway silenced them both. James moved protectively toward Emily as the doorknob turned, testing the lock. After a moment, Rebecca's voice came through the wood, honey-sweet and utterly false. James, darling, dinner's nearly ready. I've made your favorite, carbonara with that truffle oil you love. James exchanged glances with Martha, whose wide eyes confirmed his suspicion. We're not hungry, he called back, keeping his voice neutral. Emily's sleeping. A pause, then Rebecca's voice again, slightly harder. You need to eat, James. Both of you do. Don't let our disagreement affect your health. I've set places for everyone in the dining room. We'll get something later, James insisted. Another pause, longer this time. As you wish, but this can't go on forever, James. We need to talk like adults. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway, and James released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She won't give up, Martha whispered. She'll find another way. James knew she was right. They couldn't remain barricaded in the office indefinitely. Eventually, they would need to leave, for food, for medication, for escape. And when they did, Rebecca and Eric would be waiting. Martha, I need you to do something important, James said, making a decision. When you leave here, act normal. Don't give them any reason to suspect you have warned us. Then find a way to secure your own room tonight. Lock the door, barricade it if necessary. Martha nodded. What about you and Emily? James glanced at his sleeping daughter, the bruise on her cheek a stark reminder of everything at stake. We'll make our move when the time is right. The less you know, the safer you'll be. After Martha left, James sat at his desk, formulating a plan. The office had only one entrance, making it both a sanctuary and a potential trap. If Rebecca and Eric decided to force their way in, or worse, set fire to the door, there would be no escape. They needed to move to a more defensible position or find a way out of the house entirely. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Dad, she called, voice fuzzy with sleep. I'm here, sweetheart, James reassured her, moving to sit beside her on the couch. I had a bad dream, Emily said, rubbing her eyes. Rebecca was trying to push my wheelchair down the stairs, just like she threatened last month when I asked to call you. James kept his expression neutral, though a chill ran through him at her words. Not just a dream, but a memory, or a premonition. You're safe now, he soothed, stroking her hair. I won't let her hurt you again. Emily looked up at him, wisdom beyond her years in those blue eyes so much like Catherine's. What's going to happen to us, Dad? We're going to get through this storm, James said firmly, and then we're going to start fresh, just you and me. Promise? Emily asked, her small voice heavy with need for reassurance. I promise, James replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. No matter what happens, I will keep you safe. Would you risk everything to protect the one you love most? The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. James used the time to prepare, gathering what he could from the office that might help them. A letter opener that could serve as a weapon, a flashlight from the desk drawer, a first aid kit kept for emergencies. He studied the office windows, considering whether they offered a viable escape route, but the 30-foot drop to the snow-covered ground below made that option too dangerous, especially for Emily. As he worked, James noticed Emily watching him intently from the couch, her small fingers nervously plucking at Mr. Button's torn seam. I should have told you sooner, she said suddenly, her voice small but steady. About Rebecca. About everything. James knelt beside her. This isn't your fault, Em. None of it. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I was scared. She showed me pictures of kids in foster homes. Said that's where they send children whose parents don't want them. Said you'd choose her if you had to pick. Because I was just broken. Rage flared in James's chest, but he kept his voice gentle. Emily, look at me. You are the most important person in my life. Nothing and no one could ever change that. And there is nothing broken about you. But my legs don't work, Emily whispered, the cruel words Rebecca had planted taking root. Your legs are hurt, James corrected softly, but you are whole and perfect exactly as you are. You're smart, brave, kind, braver than most adults I know. You hit a camera to gather evidence. You kept that diary. That's not broken, Em. That's extraordinary. A small, tentative smile touched Emily's lips, the first real one he'd seen in months. It vanished quickly, but its momentary presence gave James renewed determination. He would see that smile again, would make it a permanent fixture in their lives, whatever it took. Around midnight, the house fell silent. James cracked the office door, listening intently for any movement. Hearing nothing, he made a decision. Emily, he whispered, gently touching her shoulder. We need to move now while they're sleeping. Emily blinked, instantly alert. She'd learned through painful experience to wake quickly and quietly when necessary. Where are we going? Somewhere safer, James explained, helping her into her wheelchair. We need to be very quiet, like mice. Emily nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity of their situation despite her young age. James transferred everything he'd gathered into a backpack, including Emily's medications and her diary. He checked that the gun was secure at his back, then unlocked the office door as silently as possible. The hallway was dimly lit by battery-powered emergency lights, casting long shadows across the floor. James pushed Emily's wheelchair with exquisite care, wincing at every small creak of its wheels. They moved toward the back staircase, a narrower servant's route that would take them to the kitchen and from there to the cellar with its potential escape route. Halfway down the hallway, Emily tugged at James's sleeve, pointing silently toward the master bedroom. The door stood ajar, and from within came the soft sound of Rebecca's voice. She was awake, speaking to someone. James strained to hear, catching fragments of conversation. Midnight, yes, when they're asleep. The girl first, then him. A chill ran down James's spine. Rebecca wasn't just awake. She was actively planning their next move. And based on what he'd heard, they didn't have much time. James increased their pace, no longer concerned about the small noises of the wheelchair. Speed now mattered more than stealth. They reached the back staircase where James lifted Emily from her chair, carrying her in his arms. The wheelchair would be too cumbersome on the narrow steps. What about my chair? Emily whispered, concern creasing her brow. We'll have to leave it, James replied softly. I'll carry you. Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, her trust in him complete despite all the adults who had failed her. The weight of that trust pressed on James's heart, a sacred burden he would never again take lightly. They descended the stairs slowly, James placing each foot with deliberate care to avoid the steps he knew creaked. At the bottom, the kitchen stretched before them, dark and filled with unfamiliar shapes in the minimal emergency lighting. James had just stepped onto the kitchen's tiled floor when the overhead light suddenly blazed on, momentarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, he saw Eric standing by the light switch, a pistol pointed directly at them. Going somewhere? Eric asked, his tone conversational, as if they'd merely encountered each other during a midnight snack run. James clutched Emily tighter, his mind racing. Emily wasn't feeling well. I was looking for some medicine. Eric's smile never reached his eyes. In the kitchen? At midnight during a power outage? He gestured with a gun. I think you'd better put the girl down and take a seat, James. Rebecca will want to join this little family meeting. James remained standing, Emily trembling in his arms. Let us pass, Eric. Whatever you're planning, it's not too late to stop. Eric's expression hardened. It was too late the moment you started digging into things that weren't your business. Now sit down before I make you sit down. The sound of footsteps announced Rebecca's arrival. She entered the kitchen wearing a silk robe, her hair perfectly arranged despite the late hour. She showed no surprise at finding James and Emily there. Clearly, This confrontation had been expected. James, she said, her voice carrying a note of disappointment, as if he were a child caught misbehaving. This is all so unnecessary. We could have resolved this situation amicably. Amicably? James repeated, his voice tight with controlled rage. By drugging us? By hurting my daughter? Which part of that would have been amicable, Rebecca? Or should I call you Vanessa? Something flickered in Rebecca's eyes. Surprise, quickly masked. I see Emily has been telling stories again. Such an imaginative child. Not stories, James countered. Truth. I know about the financial transfers. I know about the changes to my will. I know about your plan to gain control of Emily's trust fund. Rebecca's composure faltered, the mask of perfection slipping to reveal something cold and calculating beneath. You understand nothing, she said, all pretense of warmth vanishing from her voice. Do you really think this was just about money? About your pathetic company? Then enlighten me, James said, shifting Emily slightly to keep her shielded behind his shoulder. Rebecca paced, her movements like a caged predator. 2 years ago, I had everything planned. Catherine Sullivan, lovely, perfect Catherine, was supposed to be my ticket in. I befriended her, learned everything about your family, your habits, your preferences. Then she had that convenient accident on that icy road. James felt the blood drain from his face. You knew Catherine? Rebecca's laugh was brittle, triumphant at having landed a blow. Knew her? I engineered your meeting with her in the first place. College alumni event, remember? Not a coincidence. Everything was perfect until that night on Woodward Avenue. The brakes were supposed to fail completely. She wasn't supposed to survive long enough to make it to the hospital. Wasn't supposed to have time for those touching last words and promises. Emily whimpered, burying her face against James's neck. He held her tighter, struggling to process what he was hearing. You're saying you caused the accident? The words felt thick in his throat. Technically, Eric handled that part, Rebecca said with a dismissive wave. But yes, the plan was simple. Distraught widower, vulnerable child, enter compassionate new love interest. You were so easy to manipulate, James. So desperate to replace Catherine, to find someone to care for your broken child while you buried yourself in work. Why? James asked, the single word laden with horror. Why us? Why Catherine? Rebecca's smile was cold. Because you had what I deserved. The perfect life, the wealth, the status, everything I worked for while growing up in trailer parks with nothing. Catherine was born into privilege, just like you. Neither of you ever had to struggle, to claw your way up from nothing. So this was about revenge against people you didn't even know? Justice, Rebecca corrected sharply. Taking what should have been mine all along. And it would have worked perfectly if not for your meddling child and her spying. Eric cleared his throat, clearly impatient with Rebecca's monologuing. Enough talk. We need to finish this now before the storm breaks. Rebecca nodded, composing herself. You're right, Eric, take Emily. James and I need to have a private conversation. Eric moved forward, gun still trained on James, reaching for Emily with his free hand. In that moment, several things happened simultaneously. Emily, small but fierce, struck out at Eric's approaching hand with surprising strength, causing him to flinch back. James used the momentary distraction to shift Emily to his left arm, freeing his right to reach for the gun at his back. And from the doorway came a new voice, Martha's, steady and clear. Stop right there. All heads turned to find Martha standing in the doorway, holding what appeared to be a shotgun, an old hunting piece that had belonged to the previous groundskeeper. Her hands were steady, her aim centered on Eric. The moment of surprise gave James the opening he needed. He drew his own weapon, backing toward Martha while keeping Emily shielded behind him. Put the gun down, Eric, James ordered. Eric's eyes darted between James and Martha, calculating odds. Don't be stupid, Martha, he said finally. You think Sullivan will keep you on after this? You'll lose your sister's medical support, everything. Martha's aim didn't waver. Some things matter more than a paycheck, Mr. Carson, like being able to sleep at night. Rebecca, seeing the situation slipping from her control, changed tactics. Her expression softened, tears welling in her eyes. James, please. This is all a misunderstanding. Eric is overreacting. We can talk about this, about us, our future together. There is no us, James replied flatly. There never really was. Something dark and dangerous flashed across Rebecca's face, all pretense vanishing in an instant. Fine, she spat. Have it your way. But know this, without me, you're nothing. A sad widower with a crippled child, burying himself in work because he can't face his failures as a father and a husband. Emily whimpered at the cruelty in Rebecca's voice, and James felt a surge of protective fury. Emily, he said calmly, never taking his eyes off Rebecca and Eric. Cover your ears, sweetheart. Emily obeyed, pressing her small hands over her ears. Rebecca, Eric, here's what happens now, James continued, his voice steel. You're going to place your gun on the floor, Eric. Then you're both going to walk to the front door and leave this house. The storm has weakened enough that you can make it to the road if you're determined. Whether you do or not is no concern of mine. Eric laughed. You're in no position to make demands, Sullivan. There are two of us, and you can't shoot while holding the girl. He doesn't have to, came a new voice from the kitchen's exterior doorway. Detective Sarah Martinez stood there, snow-caking her heavy police jacket, her face reddened from cold. Her service weapon was drawn and aimed steadily at Eric. Behind her, two uniformed officers appeared, their weapons also trained on the room's occupants. Boston PD, Martinez announced, her breath visible in the cold air flowing through the now open door. Drop your weapon, now. For a moment, no one moved. Then, calculating his odds and finding them wanting, Eric slowly placed his gun on the floor. Rebecca's face contorted with rage as she realized their plan had collapsed. This isn't over, she hissed at James. Yes, Martinez corrected her firmly. It is. As Martinez read them their rights and placed them in handcuffs, James held Emily close, whispering reassurances. Martha lowered the shotgun, her hands finally beginning to tremble now that the immediate danger had passed. How did you get here? James asked Martinez once Rebecca and Eric had been secured in separate rooms. I thought the roads were completely impassable. Martinez brushed snow from her jacket, exhaustion evident in the lines of her face. They nearly are. Took us 6 hours to go 5 miles. Snowplow escort, then snowmobiles for the last stretch. Then we had to hike the final quarter mile. Your housekeeper's call came in just as the landlines went down. Between that and the financial documents you sent earlier, I knew we couldn't wait until morning. James turned to Martha in gratitude. That old phone line saved our lives. Martha smiled tiredly. Just wish I'd found the courage to call someone months ago to protect Emily. You protected her tonight, James said simply. That's what matters now. Martinez approached them, her expression softening as she looked at Emily. You must be Emily, she said, kneeling to bring herself to the child's eye level. I'm Detective Martinez. Your dad sent me some very important information, and you were very brave to help him get it. Emily studied her solemnly. Are they going to jail? Yes, Martinez confirmed, her tone gentle but firm. They won't hurt you or your dad ever again. Good, Emily said with the simple certainty of a child. Then after a moment's hesitation, she asked, What about my mom? Did they really make her crash? Martinez exchanged a glance with James before answering carefully. We're going to investigate everything they did, Emily. If they hurt your mom, we'll find out, I promise. Emily nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. She leaned her head against James's shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her now that the immediate danger had passed. The next hours unfolded in a blur of police activity. Despite the continuing storm, Martinez had arranged for backup and medical personnel who arrived via the same arduously plowed road. Rebecca and Eric were transported to custody, their faces set in masks of cold fury as they were led from the house. A paramedic examined Emily, confirming that her injuries, while painful, were not severe. She's resilient, the woman told James privately. But I'd recommend a child psychologist to help her process the trauma. James nodded, watching as Emily spoke quietly with a female officer who was gently gathering her statement. His daughter sat straight-backed and dignified, answering questions with a clarity and courage that made his heart ache with pride and regret. I should have protected her better, James said, more to himself than to the paramedic. You're protecting her now, the woman replied kindly. That's what matters. By dawn, the storm had finally broken. Sunlight spilled across the snow-covered landscape, transforming the world outside into a glittering expanse of white. James stood at the kitchen window, watching as the last police vehicle departed, carrying the evidence that would ensure Rebecca and Eric face justice. Martha approached, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "For you and Emily," she said. "Real hot chocolate this time. No nasty surprises." James accepted the mugs with a grateful smile. "Martha, I can never thank you enough." "No thanks needed, Mr. Sullivan, but if you're offering—" She hesitated, then continued. "I'd like to stay on, if that's all right. I've come to think of Emily as family." "We'd be honored to have you," James assured her. "And please, call me James." When James entered the living room, he found Emily seated on the couch, wrapped in blankets, looking out at the snow. He placed the hot chocolate on the table beside her and sat down, his arm gently encircling her shoulders. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" he asked. Emily considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Safer," she decided, "but still sad." "That's okay," James told her. "Being sad is part of healing, and we're going to heal together." Emily leaned against him, her small body fitting perfectly against his side. "Dad, can we fix Mr. Buttons again?" James smiled, thinking of the torn teddy bear still lying on his office desk. "Absolutely. In fact, I think Mr. Buttons deserves extra special repairs this time. Maybe even a medal for bravery." This earned him a small smile from Emily, the second genuine one in less than a day. It transformed her face, illuminating the child beneath the trauma, and James made a silent vow to do whatever it took to see that smile more often. "Dad?" Emily asked, her voice growing serious again. "Do you think Mom can see us now? Do you think she knows we're okay?" James felt his throat tighten with emotion. Catherine had been gone for 2 years, but in this moment he could almost feel her presence. In Emily's eyes, in the determined set of her small chin, in the resilience she'd shown in the face of cruelty. "I think she's always been watching over us," he said finally. "And I think she'd be incredibly proud of how brave you've been." Emily nodded, seeming to find comfort in this thought. "She told me once that we Sullivans don't give up. Not ever." "She was right about that," James agreed, pulling his daughter closer. "We don't give up, and we always keep our promises." 2 weeks later, the Sullivan house was quieter but far from peaceful. Reporters camped at the end of the driveway, their satellite vans creating a small media village. The story had exploded across national news. Wealthy CEO's wife revealed as con artist, child abuse, attempted murder, and the shocking suggestion that Catherine Sullivan's fatal car accident might not have been an accident at all. James kept Emily shielded from the worst of it, but he couldn't protect her from all the whispers and stares when they ventured out. The hospital visits continued, both for her physical therapy and for sessions with Dr. Eleanor Winters, the child psychologist Martinez had recommended. "How is she doing?" James asked Dr. Winters after one such session, while Emily waited in the play area outside her office. The psychologist's expression was thoughtful. "Better than expected, honestly. Children are remarkably resilient, especially when they have a secure attachment figure. Like you. She trusts you completely, which gives her a safe foundation for processing everything else." "But the nightmares continue," James pointed out. "Almost every night." "That's normal after trauma," Dr. Winters assured him. "But there's something else I wanted to discuss with you." Emily mentioned that Rebecca told her she was broken because of her disability. "That's a narrative we need to actively counter." James nodded, remembering Emily's words the night of the confrontation. "I've tried to tell her there's nothing broken about her." "Words matter," Dr. Winters agreed, "but so do actions. Emily needs to see herself as capable, as having agency in her own life. The more independence she can gain, physically, emotionally, the stronger her self-image will become." As James drove Emily home through the snow-lined streets, he thought about Dr. Winters' words. Independence, agency. How could he foster that in a child who had endured so much, who had been made to feel so powerless? The answer came in the form of Detective Martinez, who arrived at the house that evening with a small box under her arm. "I brought something for Emily," she explained, setting the box on the coffee table. Emily, seated in her wheelchair nearby, looked up from her book with interest. "For me?" "Open it," Martinez encouraged with a smile. Emily carefully lifted the lid to reveal what looked like a small camera. similar to the one she'd hidden in her teddy bear. Her eyes widened in recognition. It's not exactly the same as your original, Martinez explained, but it's better. This one connects directly to a secure server at the police department. If you ever feel unsafe, if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, you can record it, and we'll know immediately. Emily turned the device over in her hands, wonder replacing the initial wariness in her expression. It's like my own protection. Exactly, Martinez confirmed. You were smart enough to gather evidence before. This just makes it easier. James watched something change in his daughter's posture, a straightening of her small shoulders, a lifting of her chin. The camera wasn't just a device. It was a tangible symbol that she was believed, that her voice mattered, that she had the power to protect herself. Thank you, Emily said solemnly, looking directly at Martinez with newfound confidence. Later, after Emily had gone to bed, James sat with Martinez in the kitchen, sharing a cup of coffee. That was inspired, he said, nodding toward the stairs where Emily had disappeared with her new treasure, giving her back some control. Martinez nodded. Sometimes the best therapy isn't talking about what happened, but ensuring it never happens again. She hesitated, then added, there's something else you should know. The forensic team found evidence on Rebecca's devices, surveillance photos of Catherine dating back 3 years before her death. James's hand tightened around his coffee cup. So Emily was right. They were targeting us long before the accident. It appears so, Martinez confirmed. We've reopened the investigation into Catherine's death. The brake line evidence is long gone, but we found a substantial payment from one of Eric's shell companies to a mechanic who worked on Catherine's car the week before the crash. He's agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. A complex mixture of emotions washed through James. Grief rekindled, rage at the calculated cruelty, but also a sense of grim satisfaction that Catherine might finally receive justice. What happens now, he asked. Now, Bao, Martinez sighed, the weight of the case evident in the lines of her face. Now we build the strongest possible case. Rebecca and Eric are facing multiple charges: conspiracy, fraud, child abuse, attempted murder. With the evidence we've gathered and Emily's testimony, they'll be away for a very long time. And Catherine? If we can prove they tampered with her car, they'll face additional charges of vehicular homicide, Martinez said. It won't bring her back, but it matters, James finished. The truth matters. 1 month after the night of the storm, the Sullivan house had transformed. Gone were the cold, perfect furnishings Rebecca had chosen, replaced with warmer, more comfortable pieces. Emily's therapy equipment had been moved from the isolated sunroom to the family room, where James could work nearby while she did her exercises. The media frenzy had begun to die down, replaced by a steadier rhythm of legal proceedings. James had restructured his work schedule to allow him to be home 3 days a week, delegating more responsibility to his executive team. Some board members had grumbled, but faced with his unwavering priority, Emily's well-being, they had ultimately relented. Detective Martinez visited regularly, updating them on the case against Rebecca and Eric. The evidence was overwhelming: financial fraud, identity theft, child abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. The investigation had confirmed Rebecca's true identity as Vanessa Miller, a con artist with a history of targeting wealthy, vulnerable men. Eric, whose real name was Tyler Ross, had a similar record. They had been working together for years. The case involving Catherine's death was proceeding more slowly, but Martinez remained confident. The mechanic's testimony is crucial, she explained during one visit. He's confirmed that Eric paid him to tamper with the brake line, not enough to cause immediate failure, but enough to ensure it would eventually give way on a wet or icy road. James absorbed this information with a grim nod. The confirmation of what he'd suspected brought no joy, only a sad clarity. Catherine always insisted on having the car checked before winter. She was so careful, especially with Emily in the car. They counted on that, Martinez said softly. They used her caution against her. Outside in the garden, Emily was working with her new physical therapist, a young man named David who had specialized in pediatric rehabilitation for children with trauma. Through the window, James could see her concentrated expression as she attempted to stand between parallel bars, her legs supported by lightweight braces. How's she doing? Martinez asked, following his gaze. Better every day, James replied, unable to keep the pride from his voice. The nightmares are less frequent now, and she's talking more. About everything, not just what happened with Rebecca. Martinez nodded approvingly. And how about her father? James smiled ruefully, learning to balance work and family better. Some things are more important than business deals. Good man, Martinez said, clapping him on the shoulder. Outside, snow still blanketed the garden, though the spring thaw had begun to peek through in patches of green. Emily's therapist was helping her navigate a short path between the parallel bars, her face set in determination. She'll walk again, David had told James privately. Maybe not without some assistance, but with the right support and her determination, I wouldn't bet against her. That evening, as James tucked Emily into bed, she held up her repaired teddy bear for inspection. Mr. Buttons had been lovingly restored, his torn belly carefully sewn with fine stitches, new stuffing replacing what had been lost, and a small heart embroidered on his chest. James's addition, done with painstaking care despite his inexperience with needle and thread. He's perfect, Emily declared, hugging the bear close. Better than before. Sometimes, James said softly, the things that get broken and fixed end up stronger than they were originally. Emily considered this, her eyes wise beyond her years. Like us? James felt his throat tighten with emotion. Exactly like us. He leaned down to kiss her forehead, but Emily caught his face between her small hands, her expression suddenly serious. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Can I smile again now, for real? The simple question nearly undid him. James gathered his daughter into a gentle embrace, his voice rough with unshed tears. You can always smile, Emily, and I promise I'll be here to see it every time you do. Emily's arms tightened around his neck, and against his shoulder he felt the curve of her smile, small but genuine, the beginning of a healing that would continue long after the last snow had melted. 6 months later, summer had transformed the Sullivan estate. The gardens bloomed with colors Catherine had planted years before, flowers Emily had helped select sprouting alongside her mother's perennials. The wheelchair ramp had been replaced with a more elegant design that curved through the garden, allowing Emily to navigate independently to her favorite reading spot beneath the old oak tree. Rebecca and Eric's trial had concluded with the justice system delivering its verdict. Guilty on all counts. The additional investigation into Catherine's death had resulted in vehicular homicide charges, ensuring they would remain imprisoned for decades to come. Life had settled into a new normal for the Sullivan household. Martha had stayed on, her role evolving from housekeeper to something more like family. James had permanently restructured his work schedule to prioritize being present for his daughter. And Detective Martinez had become a regular visitor, her professional interest in their case having evolved into genuine friendship. But the most profound change was in Emily herself. The fearful, withdrawn child who had suffered in silence had blossomed into a confident 8-year-old who faced challenges with remarkable courage. Her therapist called her progress extraordinary, a testament to her resilience and the secure environment James had created around her. The physical therapy continued, with results that exceeded everyone's expectations. By early fall, Emily could stand unassisted for short periods and take several steps with lightweight braces and a walker. Each small victory was celebrated as the milestone it truly was. On a crisp December morning with the first snow of the season dusting the ground, James stood in the garden, watching Emily navigate the path with her walker, each step deliberate but increasingly confident. Dad, look, she called excitedly. I made it all the way around without stopping. James applauded, his heart swelling with pride. That's amazing, Em, Emily beamed, her face flushed with effort and accomplishment. Then with a mischievous grin, she carefully lowered herself to a patch of fresh snow. Help me make a snow angel. James knelt beside her, supporting her as she moved her arms and legs to create the familiar pattern in the snow. Her laughter rang out clear and unburdened as she worked. Now you make one too, she insisted, and James obliged, lying in the snow beside his daughter, to create his own angel. As they lay side by side looking up at the winter sky, James reflected on the journey they'd traveled. The wounds of the past would always be part of their story, but they no longer defined their future. Dad? Emily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was sitting up now, snow dusting her hair like tiny diamonds. Are you happy? The question surprised him. Of course I am, sweetheart. Why do you ask? Emily brushed snow from her mittens, her expression thoughtful. Sometimes I see you looking sad when you think I don't notice. Is it because you miss Mom? James sat up beside her, choosing his words carefully. I do miss your mom, I always will, but that's not the same as being unhappy. He reached out to brush a snowflake from her cheek. I'm incredibly happy because I have you, and because we're safe together. Sometimes I just remember how close I came to losing you, and it makes me glad and grateful all at once. Emily nodded, processing this with characteristic seriousness before her face brightened. Let's build a snow family, with snow angels for guardians. As they worked together, shaping snow into figures and creating a protective circle of snow angels around them, James realized that they had indeed been rebuilt, stronger at the broken places, just as he'd told Emily. When their snow family was complete, Emily stood with the support of her walker, admiring their creation. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the snow and illuminating their faces with golden light. Dad, Emily said quietly, her gaze fixed on their snow sculpture. Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for keeping your promise. James knelt in the snow beside her, meeting her eyes. Which promise, Mom? Emily smiled, fully, radiantly, without reservation. To keep me safe, to never leave, to be here to see me smile again. James pulled his daughter close, his heart full beyond measure. In the distance, a cardinal landed on a snow-covered branch, its bright red plumage vivid against the white landscape, a flash of color and life, persisting even in the depths of winter. That's a promise I'll keep forever, he whispered against her hair, no matter what storms may come. And as father and daughter stood together in the snow, their breath forming small clouds in the crisp air, the Sullivan house behind them glowed with warmth and light, no longer a place of secrets and shadows, but a true home rebuilt on foundations of love, truth, and the unbreakable bond between a father and the daughter he had sworn to protect. In the end, some promises are worth any price to keep.